Hello trainers and welcome back to Orlando Pokemon Regionals as we're getting closer and closer to getting started with our round 5 match. Sarah Dawn joined here with Gabby Snyder, stolen from the Pokemon Go side for a little bit of VGC. And I mean, it's an exciting time to be involved in VGC because this stuff is hype.
It is so exciting, and what really excites me about this next matchup is these are two incredibly talented trainers. Again, two world caliber trainers we have facing off against each other, and it's only round 5 of this tournament. I mean, I think one of the things that's really stood out to me about VGC this year is just these tournaments are getting bigger and more exciting, and the trainers just keep getting better and better as well. It's really been I think Scarlet and Violet honestly has opened the doors for some very high-level play in Pokemon, and it's so exciting to be a part of that for sure.
What's really cool about Scarlet and Violet as well is that everyone started on equal footing. I mean, with Sword and Shield, I mean, I didn't start playing until just the tail end of Series 5. So there's all of a sudden, what, 4 series that I just completely missed out on? There's been people who've been playing for years and years, or maybe just coming in the middle of a format. Whereas now Scarlet and Violet, I mean, I dare say there's many people here that are just starting right at the second. They've probably been playing since the game came out, and that's just really exciting to see which players that have been, you know, staple names throughout the format still doing well in this new era of Pokemon, and which newer players that are just starting now are really making a name for themselves.
Yeah, with terrestrialization as such a unique mechanic compared to some of the other game mechanics, if you will, we've had in the past, such as Mega Evolution, Dynamax, Z-Moves, it really opens up a new style of play for competitive Pokemon. You have to worry a lot more about your type matchups. You have to worry a lot more about switching, about how your Pokemon are facing off on the field. And because of that, you're right, you know, it does allow newer players to kind of enter in with an even footing. You know, maybe you don't have the years and years of experience and you can't necessarily look at the Pokedex and say, okay, Volcarona was great 5 years ago, it's probably going to be great now, I'm going to go ahead and put that on my team. But you can look at the tools available to you and sort of figure out, okay, this is what I'm comfortable with, and play that to some great success.
And there's definitely the pros and cons to both, because I mean, we're getting to see players that have been playing for a long time still do well now. There's definitely transferable skills throughout the formats, even when things are changing. I mean, Dynamax required a certain skill, now terrestrialization, it's a different skill. But the skills that some of these trainers have, I mean, they're timeless. They're going to be existing through the games, through the formats, which is then just a real testament to their skill going on. But then also someone who is not plagued with, oh no, Dynamax, and like trying to hold on to something. It's cool to see how they're doing, but these are two players that we have now that definitely have been playing for definitely their fair share of time.
Oh yeah, on the left-hand side of your screen, we have Chua, who got the top 4 placing at the most recent World Championships over in London. Again, no stranger, has been competing honestly since 2016, if not earlier, I believe, 2015 for sure. Currently 4-0 in the tournament and running a team of Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, Arcanine, Amoonguss, Iron Hands, and Roaring Moon. There it is, it's right there.
Let's go. I feel like there's no way they could have known, but I feel like they were listening to our wish list. They're, all right.
Oh, yeah.
But going up against Paul, it is going to be Joshua Lorcy. And this is a player as well, maybe not as decorated as Paul Chua is, but definitely still has been playing for a while, notably as well, placing 26th in San Diego. That was a huge regional that just happened. That is just getting used to Scarlet and Violet, and being able to get a performance like that out of so many players, that is still impressive. And this has been playing since at least 2016, where, you know what, getting placements at US Nationals, like definitely a player as well who knows his stuff.
Yeah, he took a few years off, I believe, due to some career stuff, but is a local to the New York region in particular. So, you know, I've seen him at a lot of Northeastern events, you know, regionals in the past, but locals as well. And his team of Amoonguss, Talonflame, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, the Great Tusk, and Kingambit honestly feels very similar to how Paul Chua is approaching this event. You know, you have that core of the Iron Bundle and the Fluttermane attempting to get the speed control on your side. It is choice specs on both of these Flutter mains, which means they're going to be hitting incredibly hard and just trying to find that positioning and using the other Pokemon on your team for support. And when it comes to such a similar approach for these trainers, you've got to wonder how their support options are going to differ. You know, we have the Talonflame on Joshua's side of the field that can get access to a priority Tailwind, but you also have the Roaring Moon on Paul's side of the field that has Tailwind as well. So, you know, looking at this matchup, I think we're going to see some buys for speed control, possibly some use of Amoonguss to try and put Pokemon to sleep, to open up the door for these Flutter mains to come in and do what they do best and secure knockouts.
See, at the top of the show with Adam and Rose, we were talking about the MVP, the most valuable bird. And I didn't say it then because, you know, it ain't my show, but I love Talonflame. And even if it doesn't necessarily get the results or the love it deserves all the time, I think it's going to be such a strong pick. So I'm really excited to see it here over on Joshua's end, leading the way as well. I mean, as Tailwind Pokemon definitely can be next to that Flutter main, but on the other hand, it will be the Iron Hands and that Amoonguss.
You have two completely different approaches to the start of this game. On Joshua's side of the field, you have the very aggressive Talonflame plus Flutter main combination, going for that Tailwind and going for those big, powerful Choice Specs boosted attacks immediately. And on Paul's side of the field, you have Fake Out and you have Spore. So Paul could decide to go for a early game Fake Out into the Talonflame, stop the Tailwind, hope that your Amoonguss can hold on through a potential attack from this Flutter main and put it to sleep. Or you could even just try and get a little bit of damage down as well. But it looks like Paul will be saving this Amoonguss for later on in the matchup when it can be a bit more use.
Yeah, at this point, it will be the Arcanine coming in place. The Intimidate will drop the attack on both Pokemon, but that will be a little bit more noticeable for the Talonflame at this point. So it's going to be a first turn crystallization at this point, and it will be this Talonflame. This is so nice because worried about any of anything, well, Ghost type, I'm not going to worry there.
Yeah, and the Ghost typing as well will mean that Talonflame's health will remain full, so it should be able to use the Gale Wing's ability to get a priority Tailwind if that's what Joshua wants to go for. But this Iron Hands as well will be terastallizing to a Grass-type Pokemon, which is a bit of a unique choice here. But already we're seeing a taunt from this Talonflame into that Arcanine.
That was previously the Amoonguss, looking to be shutting that down as a Dazzling Gleam. Not too much damage on the Pokemon here. The Volt Switch is going to be so nice. The Ghost, sure, you're not going to be hit by normal Ghost moves. The Convert Cloak on the Talonflame also prevents it for things like Fake Out. But noticeably not having that Flying type anymore is going to be the important part, with the Volt Switch doing significantly less damage than it would have.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that both these trainers have already locked into a defensive Terra typing so early on in this matchup. You know, knowing that the Talonflame has Covert Cloak as well, that wasn't something that Joshua necessarily had to lock into, but just making the correct read that the Iron Hands was the biggest concern to him at that point in time, going for that terastallization, keeping the Talonflame around on the field. Now could get that Tailwind up, which is going to be really important if he hopes that this Kingambit can face off against the Arcanine eventually, as Paul also switching it out. We're really seeing a lot of defensive play from both these trainers as they try to find the advantage.
Yeah, no longer a priority move, considering already been chunked down, but still being the fastest thing on the field is going to be able to move first in that situation. In this point, just the Pollen Puff, a little bit of health back to the Iron Hands over on Paul's end.
You know, this Kingambit, if it's able to hold on for a few more turns, it has Defiant, which means that Paul cannot switch in that Arcanine, so that's good for him for now. But I don't know how this Kingambit is going to handle facing off against the Iron Hands. Yes, it is a Grass-type Pokemon thanks to that terastallization, but Kingambit won't be able to deal any damage to it really, and Iron Hands can just go for the Drain Punches very comfortably right now.
Well, at least if it tries to target into the Kingambit, it won't be doing anything, as it will be and protect over on Joshua's end of the field. Very well called, as the Drain Punch failed to do anything. Taunt now hitting into the Amoonguss, also locking down the Spore. So really nice turn over on Joshua's end.
Yeah, both these trainers, I think, are very comfortable with a slower play style, so we're going to be seeing a lot of these turns where they're just vying for positioning. And, you know, now that the Amoonguss can't go for Spore, you can send in something like the Fluttermane a bit more comfortably. Fluttermane does not have to worry about being knocked out from a Pollen Puff or any attack, really, from this Iron Hands, thanks to the burn from the Talonflame. If it can find the alignment it needs, it can do some really big damage here, but will take the Drain Punch very comfortably to start.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to take it at all.
Exactly.
I guess that you can say, yeah, technically it did take it very well because it didn't take. You know what, you're right. Just, you know, difference of words here. But yeah, great job here from Joshua to make sure that this Iron Hands is burnt. So it's going to be limiting the damage that it does and making that read and making that swap. So this Fluttermane can now look to be putting on some pressure.
And I think Joshua does have to capitalize on that now. You know, we've seen some very passive turns from both of these trainers, and this Fluttermane, looking at its attacks, it has Moonblast, it has Dazzling Gleam, and it has Shadow Ball, and I think that Joshua just has to lock in this Shadow Ball against one of the Pokemon on Paul's side of the field to begin to do damage. You know, personally, knowing that Taunt is going to last for a few more turns, I'd probably prioritize the Iron Hands. And you also have to worry again about the Amoonguss just switching around again to get its health back. So Iron Hands seems to be the Pokemon to beat right now, just going straight for the Moonblast into it.
Good amount of damage and will be a Wild Charge in return, though a little bit of recoil done. The Pollen Puff, though, sure, it's just the secondary effect of doing some health, giving some health to your partner Pokemon, but since it is still attack, we'll be able to do that through the Taunt, and that was the last turn of it. As well, last turn of Tailwind over on Joshua's end, however, that Iron Bundle that did come in did have the booster energy with the Quark Drive to boost its speed.
I think that Fluttermane should also naturally be faster than the Amoonguss for sure, and most likely the Iron Hands as well. So Joshua probably looking to try and deal some super effective Ice-type damage to the two Pokemon on Paul's side of the field, and also limit his options for switching around, as whatever Pokemon is coming in most likely will have its speed dropped or possibly will take a ton of damage from Hydro Pump. Yes, it's a bit of a risky move in this situation, and it's not something that I think Joshua should lock into unless he's confident about an Arcanine switch, but the threat is there and Paul has to respect that.
Instead, though, the Freeze Dry, Hydro Pump wouldn't be doing that super effective damage, but the Freeze Dry will, and paired up with the Moonblast, not quite enough damage, but getting a little closer to that. However, the Drain Punch into the Fluttermane, yet again, maybe predicting a swap in, is not going to do anything, and the Moonguss going for the Spore instead of Pollen Puff means that this Iron Hands is going to stay at very little health.
And that is exactly what Joshua needs to capitalize a bit on this position. I think that he needs to go for the knockout on this Iron Hands. May have to worry about a few sleep turns from this Amoonguss as a result, but just getting rid of one of Paul's attackers is going to help open up his win conditions later on. I think the other thing he has to be concerned about is what is that last Pokemon on Paul's side of the field. You know, we do have the advantage of seeing what it is, but if he's not sure and he sends in the wrong Pokemon to take some of these attacks, he could line himself up for a very difficult endgame.
It's going to be a double swap over on Joshua's end as Talonflame hits the field in the King Gambit, just to make sure that you can position up exactly how you would like in this situation. The Drain Punch, though, yet again into the slot, finally going to be paying off. That is a lot of damage and healing of a good considerable amount as well. Spore to follow up. That one won't be quite as effective due to the safety goggles.
Yeah, Paul making an excellent prediction there that Joshua would try and swap in the King Gambit to take advantage of the fact that Burn would have knocked out the Iron Hands, but instead getting its health back and just sticking around for Joshua to have to deal with. Unfortunately for this Amoonguss, it won't be able to put any of these Pokemon to sleep at this point, really, so could be a great opportunity for Paul to try and switch that Pokemon around, but I think instead he's just going to play this out. We've already seen that he's very comfortable going for those Pollen Puffs to heal up the Iron Hands health, and that strategy has worked out really well for him so far, as Joshua just can't match the amount of healing on that side of the field.
And protect for King Gambit to make sure it's nice and safe, as yet again, Amoonguss to be shut down by the taunt. A Volt Switch into the slot, though, King Gambit would have been safe, at least from that angle, as Iron Hands is going to the back. A chance to bring something else out, and that Iron Bundle looking to make a lot of mileage with that.
And knowing that it is the Iron Bundle as the last Pokemon from Paul, I think gives Joshua a bit of an advantage here, because the way he was playing, I think he thought it was the Flutter Mane, but instead it's going to be this Iron Bundle. There's really only 2 Pokemon on Paul's side of the field that can deal big damage, and that's going to be the Arcanine and the Iron Hands, and Paul has been playing to keep that Iron Hands as safe as possible. I think this is the perfect opportunity now for Joshua to just recognize that that is how he's approaching this game and keep the Flutter Mane safe, away from the spores, away from the Iron Bundle on Paul's side of the field, until it can just lock in those Moonblasts against the Iron Hands. I mean, we saw that was about a 3-hit knockout, and there's really not much damage the Iron Hands can do in return.
Iron Bundle disappearing for half a second as it hides itself behind Protect at this point. The Talonflame, that we saw that Tailwind peter out a while ago. This is a free chance to get set up in more ways than just one. The Kingambit now safe from an attack, at least from the Iron Bundle. So going for the Sword Stance, the Pollen Puff not going to be enough. So now the Kingambit has speed and attack on its side.
Kingambit also has access to Sucker Punch, which means that if Joshua makes a correct prediction here and goes for some big damage on either of these Pokemon, he's guaranteed to move first. Also, Assurance, a very powerful Dark-type move as well, so Paul just has to be very careful here. That all being said, Freeze Dry on the Iron Bundle should be enough to pick up the knockout at this point in time. It's possible a second Pollen Puff as well will deal enough damage there, so Paul could just try and call the fact that this Kingambit got the Sword Stance and will protect this turn, but no protects. Instead, Brave Bird just going straight into that Amoonguss for some really big damage.
Yeah, hitting right into that Amoonguss, bringing it below half health. But this is where something like that Citrus Berry is going to be taking effect to make sure that it can survive through just a bit more. And Kingambit, sure, might have the Tailwind on its sides, but that Iron Bundle has the speed, and it will be a Freeze Dry to take care of that Pokemon.
Yeah, given how defensively Paul has been approaching this matchup, I think Joshua just wasn't confident going for a Sucker Punch there, and you can understand why. He could have also potentially just Sucker Punched the Amoonguss, as it was taunted, but there's nothing necessarily stopping Paul from making a swap back into that Iron Hands there to protect it. So overall, just could have capitalized on that Sword Stance, but Paul just targeting it right, and just knowing also the speed tiers of these Pokemon as well, knowing that with the booster energy, Iron Bundle was more than capable of taking that knockout.
And even if there was one thing on Paul's end targeted, that Pollen Puff was into the Kingambit slot. So just ensuring that something would have gotten there in the end anyways. Iron Bundle to start this turn off is going to be protecting, but the Brave Bird from Talonflame is going to be finishing off the Iron Hand. Critical hit, not going to matter. That was going to be a super effective hit anyways, thanks to the Terastallization, and the Iron Hands is gone.
Now that the Kingambit, though, is gone on Joshua's side of the field, the Arcanine at least can come in and be a little bit more comfortable. I mean, Arcanine would have always benefited from the type advantages in that matchup for sure, but the Intimidate ability that it has would have set off Defiant, which would have further boosted that Kingambit's attack. Again, now that that's removed from the field, you can just be a little bit more confident with how you play this Pokemon and really start going for damage. You know, Arcanine has access to Flare Blitz or Snarl in this situation. While you could take a bit of a slower approach and try and stack up those Snarls to weaken the Flutter Mane's attack, I think that given Paul has already lost the Iron Hands, it's probably better to just try and find an opportunity to throw the Flare Blitz into that already weakened Flutter Mane, try and go for the knockout, and then there's only so much the Talonflame can do damage in return, because we've seen it go for Brave Bird a couple of times now. It's taking recoil damage. There's only so much longer it can stay out on the field, and you need damage at this point in time. Taunt is cool, Tailwind is cool, Will-O-Wisp would be awesome if the Arcanine wasn't a Fire-type Pokemon and you could burn it to weaken its attack. But still, Arcanine just in a great position here.
As well, the Brave Birds from Talonflame going to be doing less, considering there was that Intimidate that was coming out. A super effective hit into the Amoonguss will still get a chunk of damage, but not nearly as much as you would have liked into that situation. Dazzling Gleam now, just a little bit of chip on both ends, but now the Flare Blitz into the Flutter Mane. Arcanine already hits well, but also Flutter Mane, not necessarily a Pokemon that appreciates that type of hits anyways, is going to go down.
I'm honestly surprised to see Joshua go for the Dazzling Gleam there, as it is a choice specs on that Flutter Mane that was going to be his one move for the remainder of its time on the field. Probably trying to deal a little bit of damage to the Iron Bundle on Paul's side of the field as well, recognizing that there is the potential here for the Arcanine to just kind of go and deal that big damage and get that knockout regardless. Now, unfortunately for Joshua, I think he's put in a position where you have to hope that the Hydro Pump connects with your target here. I don't think that this Arcanine will go for Protect, though it does have access to it right now. I think you just have to click Hydro Pump, hope that it connects, hopes that it can get that knockout. And Paul could also just redirect it as it is. There is Amoonguss on the field. Amoonguss does have access to Rage Powder, and what a great time to use it for sure.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about the Hydro Pump. What if not? Another reason it is still going to be asleep. So regardless, we'll never have to find out. It does mean it will take this hit from the Brave Bird, but still just not enough damage thanks to that Intimidated. It will be enough in recoil, though, that this Talonflame's time is up.
And now Paul has a significant Pokemon advantage, has the advantage of the Iron Bundle, I think taking its first turn of sleep, and now is also dropping the special attack of that Pokemon as well. And I love how he's playing this endgame, going for the Pollen Puff into the Arcanine, but the Iron Bundle is able to wake up, will get the KO on the Amoonguss before it's able to heal up that Arcanine, but still, Arcanine I think more than capable of landing at least one more Snarl onto this Pokemon, and then the Iron Bundle on Paul's side of the field as well should be able to come in and finish the game off with a Freeze Dry.
Yeah, Flare Blitz hitting into that. I mean, this point, just that lone Iron Bundle, you're asking so much of it, and is paired up against a full HP Iron Bundle over on Paul Chua's side. So the way things are shaking up, things definitely look better for Chua in this situation. And over on Joshua's end, it will just be a Protect. Freeze Dry into that slot would have done a lot. Whatever this Arcanine's going to do, this Flare Blitz, would have done a lot. Either way, these Pokemon have the capability to take this out next turn.
Yeah, Flare Blitz hitting neutral on Iron Bundle. You know, some of the typing of these Paradox Pokemon is really unique, and having a Ice and Water type Pokemon that is geared more towards the offensive, contrasted with like Lapras, who I think we remember as a very defensive Gigantamax Pokemon that we saw last year in the VGC series, is really unique to sort of highlight in this matchup. I think it's also really unique that, you know, Paul's Iron Bundle was holding a Focus Sash, and he very smartly sort of kept it away from damage throughout that entire game, so that even in the end state, Joshua would have needed to hit that Pokemon twice. And when it's 2v1, you just can't have enough time on the field at that point, regardless if you're hitting for super effective damage or not. So just very well managed by Paul, and this is why, you know, he's consistently done well at tournaments like the World Championships. He's okay with slowing things down and just playing things very, very slowly until the threats on the opposing side of the field are gone, and that's exactly what we saw. So going into game 2, you know, I would love to see a little bit of a mix-up from Joshua. I think that he tried to use the Flutter Mane to deal like some big damage and to be that like offensive core on his side of the field, and not only did it not find the targets it wanted to find, the early terrestrialization of that Iron Hands into the Grass type just really destroyed any momentum that Flutter Mane could have picked up. Going into this game too, I'd love to see him try and rely on that King Gambit maybe a little bit more, and then bring the Great Tusk alongside of it to have a better matchup against Pokemon like Arcanine, who would be taking super effective damage from any ground type attacks. You do have to worry about the Intimidate in that situation, but thanks to your Defiant, you can sort of force the opponent to get the positioning that you want, or give a boost to your King Gambit, which, let's be real, that's always a wonderful thing to have.
It definitely is. See, from Joshua's end, I just want to see the things go. I mean, there is a lot of speed, there is a lot of power, and unfortunately, when you're going up against a team like Paul Chua's, where there is these pivot options, where there is this Amoonguss that's constantly throwing a wrench in your plans, where you're going up against this Arcanine that's able to slow things down a little bit when you're not worrying about this King Gambit, all of a sudden, when you have a team that has this aggression, you're being slowed down like that, you have your one thing, the one thing you were known for, this aggressive fast team, just taken away from you. And then all of a sudden we saw that these Pokemon weren't doing the damage that they wanted, and they were just getting picked off one by one. Even that King Gambit with that Sword Stance boost, that is so cool. Not able to capitalize off of it because it's just outsped. And that's where I'd like to see just like, you know, hey, we got some aggression. Let's just throw things at the wall. Let's let us stick and see what happens. So I definitely think this team has what it takes here. And I did like the Talonflame being able to shut down the Amoonguss. It's just, the team just didn't do enough to get across the finish line. It's like it ran out of steam, and that's the peril with these types of teams sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a very tough matchup on paper because if there's somebody who's comfortable with slow play, it's definitely Paul Chua. So you do have to be very, very particular with how you approach the matchup at hand. But at the end of the day, you know, I don't think Fluttermane was the answer. Will there be a mix-up? It's tough to say, but we're going to go ahead and jump into this game too. And it looks like it's the same lead from Joshua.
Going up against Iron Hand, the Anxious. I love that, by the way.
I feel that, like on an emotional level.
And the Amoonguss. See, I don't necessarily mind the Fluttermane. My biggest issue with the Fluttermane is I feel like the spread damage Dazzling Gleam just isn't doing enough. Fluttermane by itself already hits for so much damage. With that choice, Dex can hit for even more. Why not capitalize off of that and look for some of these 1-2 hit KOs as opposed to spreading just a minimal amount of damage around on the field?
Yeah, I mean, we saw how much Moonblast did into that Iron Hands after it terastallized, and I just don't think the damage output was there. It's possible that Joshua was hoping that maybe the Iron Hands wouldn't be making a second appearance in the lead, but not only is it doing that, it's also going straight for a terastallization after this Talonflame terastallizes once again as well. So really, we're ending up in the same game state that we started out with in game one, which brings the question, will there be any move changes, or are we just going to see the same game start to play out again?
Despite the fact that there is an Amoonguss that you have to respect, I would love to just see, hey, you're a Grass Terran, I'm just going to body this Iron Hands right now, but you can't necessarily let this be disrespected. It's, at this point, too, just going for the Rage Powder, making sure that there can't be any weird shenanigans. So it will be a safe taunt from the Talonflame to make sure on the next turn that this Amoonguss can't go for the Spores or for any more Rage Powders, and it's going to be tanking a Moonblast as well at this point. Volt Switch, yet again, into the Talonflame. Keep the slot honest, keep it easy, you're doing a little bit of damage, and you break Tail Wings, and now you get a pivot.
And we can also see that Paul has made a Pokemon adjustment in the back, but keeping that secret for now, as it is the Arcanine which will be taking the field once again. Intimidate certainly weakening the power of the Brave Bird from that Talonflame. You know, looking at the amount of health that Amoonguss has remaining, it might honestly be enough to take a intimidated Brave Bird at this point in time, which could open up the field for this Arcanine to go straight for a Flare Blitz into the Fluttermane, remove it from the field early on in the game, and just give Paul one less thing to worry about in this matchup.
Yeah, and Fluttermane, it has so many great capabilities to be such a strong, such a good Pokemon, but its offensive stat and its health is just, it leaves a little to be desired in these types of points. So it'd be a shame to see it go down by way of the Arcanine so early on in things. So definitely have to be careful if you're Joshua to make sure that if you're at least losing it, that you're going to have something in its place that's going to be doing just as well. No pivots. So trusting that things are going to go well down here as a Brave Bird into this Amoonguss. If it followed up, potentially you try and make things happen, but you need to be doing enough damage past the Citra Berry that is healing up so much health, and it won't be enough with this Moonblast.
Exactly, and there's that Flare Blitz as well, connecting with the Fluttermane. Not enough for a knockout, but certainly enough for a knockout with this upcoming turn. And on top of that, another Pollen Puff to heal the Arcanine back up to full. Paul is just so comfortable playing with this Amoonguss, even when it is taunted. You don't need to Rage Powder or Spore if you are consistently healing up your Pokemon that is the biggest threat on the field. And I don't think a Moonblast plus a Brave Bird from this Talonflame would do enough to knock out the Arcanine, even if that Talonflame wasn't intimidated. Paul just has a very significant lead on momentum at this point in time, and I think Lorcy really needs to have made a Pokemon adjustment in the team preview phase, or at least hope that this Iron Bundle can land something like a Hydro Pump against this Arcanine to give him his momentum back.
See, what I'm looking more so is not dealing with the Arcanine for the right here, right now, but instead dealing with this Amoonguss. You only needed one attack to be able to deal with it, so the Fluttermane going out leaves way for this Brave Bird from the Talonflame to be picking that up. Considering the amount of time in Game 1 that the Talonflame was dedicated to going for taunts or something, being able to make sure that there's no Rage Powder, no Spores, you're no longer stuck with that taunt is so good. The Flare Blitz Definitely does do a hefty amount of damage into the Iron Bundle, though.
It did, and this is the Pokemon adjustment that we saw Paul make. It is the Roaring Moon with a booster energy of its own to boost its speed, which means that if Paul sets up the Tailwind, we're going to be dealing with a very similar situation between the Iron Bundle and the Roaring Moon, and of course it does determine how these Pokemon are trained, and Lorcy could always go for an Icy Wind to try and keep the speed advantage, but then you have to worry about the Arcanine just going straight for the knockout into Iron Bundle. You know, without knowing his last Pokemon, he's in a position right now where as much as he wants to play support to match the support that Paul has on the field, I don't think he can necessarily go for it. I think he needs to make up for lost time, and the only way to do this at this point in time is to make sure that Arcanine is threatened by damage, which means you got to be reaching for that Hydro Pump or the Freeze Dry, especially if Kingambit is the last Pokemon in the back of your party.
See, I like the Icy Wind because the thing is Paul only has one method of speed control at this point, which is the Tailwind from this Roaring Moon. Joshua has a couple of different tools to deal with. The Will-O-Wisp, though, is definitely a little bit unfortunate. The Tailwind now coming out will ensure that these Pokemon get ×2 speed boost, even if it's negated a little bit from the Icy Wind. And that'll be the last hit into the Iron Bundle to take it out.
You know, there is one Pokemon that could come out onto the field right now and benefit significantly from that Icy Wind. If Joshua has the Great Tusk as his last Pokemon, this is going to be the best possible setup he could ask for it. The Roaring Moon would struggle to deal damage to it. You know, those headlong rushes would have been incredible, but instead it is going to be the Kingambit as the final Pokemon on the field. And really, as long as Paul keeps the Arcanine around and doesn't accidentally drop any of the stats of this Kingambit, I think he has a pretty clear path to victory. That being said, though, Kingambit is known to be one of the most powerful Sucker Punch users in the game right now, and this Talonflame certainly is not out of the competition just yet. If Joshua is able to get enough damage onto the field that a Sucker Punch could threaten a knockout, he could open up the doors to bring back some momentum to force that Iron Hands back out onto the field. And then maybe you're only a critical hit Brave Bird away from victory, but it is a very tall ask, and he needs to start really threatening these knockouts. And with the Talonflame gone now as well, thanks to that Throat Chop, it is a very tough ask.
Yeah, if there was the Tailwind and the Icy Wind last turn, that could have been so nice to make sure that you can be in a position to potentially outspeed this turn around, but instead the Throat Chop up against the Ghost Terror is going to be having a great time, and the Kingambit also taking a super effective hit. Yes, this will be a Swords Dance, but the problem is you're not really outspeeding anything at this point, so it will have to be some of the Sucker Punch games, which is not the position that you want to be in when you've lost this game one, and this is what you're relying for the game two, because there is non-attacking moves, there is the swaps, so it could be, you could find yourself in a really bad position with that.
Fluttermane could try and open up some doors with a Dazzling Gleam here, but as long as Paul is able to keep the Roaring Moon safe, again, he just has a very comfortable win condition at this point in time. And knowing that your opponent is going to be forced to rely on Sucker Punch as well adds a level of predictability here. And as you can see, the Kingambit tried to Sucker Punch the Roaring Moon potentially, or the Arcanine, depending on what move Paul went for. It looks like he guessed well.
The Sucker Punch into the Roaring Moon, since it did use Protect, was not able to do anything. So that Pokemon stays nice and safe. And that Arcanine, the Pokemon that did go for the attacking move this turn, is going to be able to freely attack into the Fluttermane. Fluttermane not doing nearly enough damage. And now 3-1 Pokemon count with just the Kingambit. Via Sucker Punch, it will take out the Arcanine, but it's not going to be enough because there's still 2 Pokemon to take it down, and the Kingambit doesn't look too healthy. Throat Chop will just do a little bit, but Kingambit's almost there.
Kingambit's almost there. Iron Hands is at full health. You know, one thing I thought Paul might have gone for was the Will-O-Wisp from the Arcanine onto the Kingambit, just to really mess with the Sucker Punch strategy and get rid of the Swords Dance boost effectively from the Kingambit. But, you know, he was in a decent spot in terms of having the Iron Hands at full health, and we see Lorcy actually concede the match to wrap things up for this round. Just a very, very commanding win by Paul there. You know, I liked how Joshua tried tried to play around a little bit, tried to set up that King Gambit for some really powerful sucker punches, but at the end of the day, Paul just had multiple options open to him. Joshua did not guess correctly which Pokemon would be the target for that sucker punch in that last turn, and that really just sealed the deal.
Plus as well, the Arcanine attacking into the Fluttermane to remove it from field to make sure it was a 3v1 Pokemon, bringing the Iron Hands in next time around. Then there's the option of the fake out. You're just completely eliminating what this King Gambit can do. So it was definitely just a rough situation to be in, but I'm happy that we got to see another new Paradox to add to our list. We got to see that Roaring Moon and being able to go for the Tailwind. I mean, that speed control is just nuts. And congratulations, Paul Chua, for this 2-0 here in round of 5.
I also find it really interesting that Paul was able to win that matchup without bringing his own Fluttermane. It felt like Joshua was really in a position where he felt like he had to keep bringing it. You know, maybe could have brought the Great Tusk if he felt like mixing things up, but I think probably wanted the speed off the Fluttermane to make sure that he had that pressure probably onto the Roaring Moon, actually, come to think of it. But in Paul's case, he just was very comfortable with, you know, maybe not having the speed advantage, knowing that the Assault Vest Iron Hands, I don't even think we had a chance to talk about that, with the Grass Terastallization as well, was enough to just power through. And I think being able to recognize that fact during Team Preview is such a key component to doing well in the Scarlet and Violet era of VGC.
Yeah, Fluttermane just on Joshua's end there. We got to see Fluttermane earlier on in the day just hitting an insane amount of damage. It just wasn't this time around. The Dazzling Gleam just not really hitting the super effectiveness that it needed into some types. Even with the choice specs, looked a little bit underwhelming in this case. And it's going to be that situation when you're going up against Pokemon that have a little bit beefier of a special defense stat or have that Assault Vest. They're going to be able to live those hits, and they're going to be able to deal that damage plus some right back to you. So it's definitely a good situation when, you know, the other 5 Pokemon on your team that aren't Fluttermane will be able to deal with the Fluttermane well enough that you don't have to bring it.
Yeah, I love seeing players make those calls during Team Preview as well. You know, I think that's something that we see a lot on the Pokemon Go side of things, because you only get 3 Pokemon and every match is only 4.5 minutes long at the end of the day, so you really have to lock into those choices pretty quickly. But to see that same kind of play style in VG, especially now that it is open team sheets and you can make those reads and you can just go for that, I don't want to say counter teaming, but just that aggression right out the door is really exciting. I mean, I've always loved the mind games of VGC. I think that's always been what keeps me coming back time and time again to annoy y'all. But to see that play out in this previous matchup was really exciting, and I hope that we get to see more and more of that as we go through Series 2 all the way up to the World Championships.
Hey, the mind games is what I love as well. It's very different from the trading card game where you're sitting there and you do your move and your opponent does your move. I love that mind games of you map out what you're doing at the exact same time. And just the reads on reads and the level of outplay. There's so many skill in each one of the different Pokemon games, but there is something special about how VG has it that definitely makes me really excited to be a part of this community and stuff. And being able to see this level of outplay with these open team sheets is really cool. And you have to give kudos yet again to Paul Chua for that.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, shout outs to Joshua Lorcy. I guarantee you this won't be the last we see of him.
Definitely not.
Possibly not even in this tournament. I mean, that was his first loss. And I believe you have to go X and 2 to still be in contention for Top Cut, X and 3 in order to get championship points, which will add up to a Worlds invite eventually, hopefully. So still has a bit of wiggle room. You know, this is the halfway mark of the tournament. You still have 5 rounds of Swiss to go. That's a long day for sure, but it can be done.
Yeah, plus, Joshua, you have to represent this Talonflame out there if I go on record saying Pelipper isn't the best bird that Talonflame is, I need to see people do some amazing things with it. And I like the Talonflame, the Ghost, the Covert Clove, being able to go for the taunts. It was, you know, it was cool. It was just a little bit of a rough matchup, but I still like the bird.
It's a very supportive take on Talonflame, which is something I never thought I'd say, because you think about Talonflame in previous series and previous games, and it's just, you know, it's there, it goes for Tailwind, it maybe gets a Brave Bird in, and then it's gone. You know, maybe a Will-O-Wisp over a Tailwind, depending on the matchup, but it really doesn't have that staying power. But the combination of a defensive Terastallization and the Covert Cloak item just really made it feel a lot bulkier than it actually was, which is exciting to see for sure. I would not anticipate a Talonflame being played like that if I were just entering into Scarlet and Violet and, you know, just not knowing what to expect.
A lot of cool things going on with Scarlet and Violet. Let's be real, but it's time to head over to the lounge now with Adam for a post-match interview.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm joined by our round 5 winner, Chua. Paul, you're at the halfway point, undefeated. Got to be feeling pretty good about that one.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I mean, I didn't really have any expectations going into this event, so like being 5-0 is kind of crazy to me.
I mean, you say that, you're always at the top tables, so like it really doesn't matter in that regard.
Yeah.
Let's of course dive into what a lot of people want to talk about. It's the team. I know you've made Joe Brown very happy by bringing the Roaring Moon. He bends my ear about it all the time. Seriously, he literally talks to me for like hours about this Pokemon. But how did that team like come to be? Did you build with people or just think like this is the way?
Yeah, so I started off this team looking at like other Series 2 tours that people have been using. And then most of the time people were just using the standard like Roaring Moon, Arcanine, Moongus, Iron Bundle, Goldango, Garganacl, stuff like that. And then I played around with that. Originally I had a Goldango on the team over Flutter Mane, but I dropped it because I felt like Arcanine and Iron Hands kind of hit that thing for super effective. Even when you like Terra, it's like not the most useful Pokemon, so I switched with that. And then other than that, like I was just trying to figure out the like what to put instead of Goldango. I was checking Pokemon Home and I saw the top 5 are already on my team. The 6th one was Flutter Mane, so I was like, oh, let me just put that on there because it essentially does like the same thing. Because I tried Sylveon before, it was too slow, and then Flutter Mane's almost like Sylveon, it's just a little faster. So that's how I came up with the Flutter Mane.
Yeah, I think a little faster might be a bit of an understatement.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely a bit different to the Sylveon, but it seems to be working out really well for you. You know, obviously coming into a different format, coming and playing that quick change from Series 1, Series 2. What are your initial thoughts? Obviously only a few days in, but it sounds like you're already reading up on the data for it.
Yeah. I mean, overall, like I think the terrestrialization is a really fun mechanic. So I think like overall, like for me, like regardless of like what Pokemon are allowed, like even like Series 1, like that was still fun for me. Like here, like even though there's new guys, that, so some of them are a little fast and stuff, a little too strong, but I still think like overall it's a pretty fun format to play. Especially when you find the team that like you like to play with. I think that's like the key. I think finding a team that you're fun, that you have a lot of fun playing with.
It feels like there's a lot of options. A couple of people have been saying it's a lot more offensive a format, but you're kind of saying that you can find something that fits you.
Yeah.
Is that like in your experience true, or do you feel like you have to play these like fast offensive Paradox Pokemon?
Well, I think overall for me, like I think the way to just approach Pokemon is like just like have fun. So like if like for example, like these offensive like Tailwind, Talonflame, Great Tusk teams, kind of like what Joshua had. If like even if it's good and you're just not having fun with it, like I don't really see it's like that much of a point because like you're just not having fun. Like even though you're just like pressing buttons and all that, if you just don't find that appealing, like you know, I personally don't agree with that approach. But.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a huge amount of merit to building something you're comfortable with, something you enjoy, and that's going to make you go the distance.
Yeah.
Which, thinking of your run, I mean, you're at 5-0. You've still got 5 more rounds to go.
Yeah.
It's a monster tournament, and obviously it's one of the top players in the room. It comes with a little bit of extra pressure. Is that something that maybe you think about during these games, or are you just very comfortable being that top player?
I mean, I just. Yeah, I usually just approach games like one at a time. Like usually, honestly, people just ask me like if it's my first tour and stuff. So it's like I'm not sure if they like see me as like a top player. Like personally, I don't view myself as like that much of a top player. But yeah. Yeah.
Really, you don't view yourself as a top player? It's humble. I gotta respect that you.
Yeah.
I
I do think there's people like better than me. There's like Eric Rios, like Wolf, like those two people I think are like a lot better than me.
I mean, there's great players all around. And
Yeah,
I think you should be included in the conversation. You know, you've even got a sequence of moves essentially named after you in the Chua fake out.
That is very true. Yeah, that's
so, you know, that's like iconic. You can take that with you, and you know that's always going to be yours.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched them a little bit. You mentioned they're in your team, and something I've been trying to track with everyone. Obviously, with Series 2, we got the Paradox Pokemon in. What do you think is going to be the Paradox Pokemon that stands on top of all of them at the end of the weekend, if you had to pick one?
I think Flutter main is probably going to be the one, just because with like other popular ones like Iron Bundle, like that one, there's like pretty much like only one way to run it. Like you just run it like super fast and all of that. Iron Hands kind of is the same way because you can't make it like that fast, but you can still make it like bulky. You can run like different types of versions of it, like Swords Dance and all of that. And I guess like technically you can still do the same thing with Flutter main. I just think it's like more powerful like stat wise. So you can do things like make it like a bulky, like berry variation, like substitute, yeah, like choice specs, all of that. Like there's more options for it. So that's why I think it has like more chance to like do better, just because there's so many like, different options. Where the other ones, it's like a more like linear approach to them. Like for example, like Iron Bundle and Iron Hands, those two are kind of, there's like only like one or two ways to run them. So
yeah, they do the same job in pretty much every single matchup, which I think it's good. You know, it's a clear identity, but yeah, it's a limiting when it comes to variety. There's actually something I was get your opinion on, kind of related to that. I know you've obviously played for a very long time. Something I've talked about with some of those other players who have been around a while. Obviously, we changed things up a little bit this year. We went to Open Team Sheet, which is something we've not had before. How do you feel playing with that compared to like previous years, where it's all been about like that Game 3 guessing game?
That's a good question. Honestly, so this is my first event using Open Team Sheets. Overall, like, I think it's a cool change. Like, you know, it's I like obviously like any change is like cool to try out at first. Overall, like I think like it's fun to play because at least like you get to see like all like any crazy text they have. So I feel like that can like show off more of either creative team building or just better playing compared to like a closed sheet where you can kind of just like catch your opponent off guard with like something surprise. Especially nowadays, like Terra, you can just like if it's closed sheet, you can like either use a Terra that's not commonly used, or just like hide it until the third game. And then, like, there's like no way to prepare for that unless you like had like someone else tell you like beforehand, like, oh, like this guy has like Terra flying Goldingo or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, Terra's like a mechanic that definitely changed things. Obviously, we've played through a number of different mechanics over the years, and something we kind of talked about a little bit, I guess, in previous events. Terra being used like defensively or offensively. Do you have like an opinion on which way is the best to go on that? I'm
not entirely sure. Like, I think like obviously you shouldn't like focus like entirely on like one side. I think like if you find like the perfect balance between the two, I think that's probably as of now how I view on how you use Terra. Obviously that opinion can change as like we play more with this mechanic, but for now that's like my opinion about it.
It's definitely changed things a lot. But before I let you go, I have one question. Obviously undefeated at the halfway mark, got to be feeling good. But is there something out there you really don't want to play? Is there something that you're maybe a little bit worried about? Yeah, I've heard that there's this one team with like belly drum, Iron Hands, and like 2 redirectors. It's like I don't want to play. It sounds really annoying. Like even if I know it's coming, it's like hard to like stop it. I feel. So that's like the one team that I've heard is doing well that I don't want to face. I guess like Dondozo sometimes, but like Dondozo dropped off. Dondozo's not as prevalent anymore, so that's kind of a win for you in that regard. Yeah. But anyway, I'll let you go get prepared for round number 6. Obviously, congratulations on the win. Thank you. Not gonna say this to everyone, but I will say to you, you are my favorite. Oh, thanks. So keep that run going. You know, you're already on the undefeated track. Keep it going. And we'll be back after a short break with more action here in Orlando.